David, can I move on to you? As I said, rather define behind us as the person that you would like to be, rather than the one you are now. But I'm particularly interested in your comment on the last comment that Patrick made about whether you need a different kind of government, and one with a shared purpose. And also, is politics dead?
Politics is absolutely not dead, no. I think politics is very alive, but there are challenges for political parties at the moment. I would, I'd start, I think you've got to start a bit big. I agree with what Robert said, but I want to sort of frame it in a more political way. Basically, everyone in this room has lived through 2 revolutions. But they've been quiet revolutions, political revolutions. The first was the social liberal revolution of the 1960s. And at its best, it's the revolution that brings as many women to this room broadly as men. It brings ethnic minorities to this room. It's the revolution we associate with Mandela, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, certainly with my party as a progressive rights-based party. But somehow by 2014, if we're just conscious of our rights and not of our responsibilities, we're in trouble. And so we emphasize the liberal of the social liberal, and we end up in a place where we're terribly atomized as conscious of ourselves, but we struggle to come back together. That's one phenomenon. The second phenomenon, I would say, is the economic liberal revolution, obviously of Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, and to some extent continued by Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. Again, obviously a liberal revolution, the freedom to make as much money as you want, however you want, with very little regulation. I hope you see where I'm going here. There's a place where The Guardian, with its rights agenda, meets the Times, in fact, and we end up in a hyper-individualised place. That is what modern politics is wrestling with. And that hyper-individualism in this country and in many developed democracies gets us to a place where it's very, very difficult to come back together again. If you put alongside that automation and technology, that has even accelerated that individualism and that hyper-individualism. So I don't think it's about the political party being dead. All political parties are coalitions. In fact, the debate about white flags and white vans illustrates in fantastic terms the coalition that is in fact the Labour Party. And in that sense, it's a coalition, and always has been, of metropolitan liberal interests and working class traditional interests. And that's what we saw. Now, we're in a fragmented place. That's all breaking up. It doesn't mean that politics is dead, or indeed that the political party is dead. It just means that it's landing in a different place, and different coalitions might come together. If you're Nigel Farage, this is a very exciting time. So, I think you also come back to cut through that, the old, bland, fight for the middle politics is not going to work. And it's particularly not going to work if a proponent, or it's going to be harder if the proponent are seen to be in one party. At the moment, we've got 3 party leaders, all of whom effectively have been to Oxbridge or Cambridge, done PPE, become a researcher, and then led a party. So you can argue powerfully that they are part of the same metropolitan liberal crowd. A kind of bland politics then that started actually with Paul Keating in Australia, Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, somehow by 2014 feels just to be a bit hackneyed and a bit tired. So look, my sense is that we arrive at a place today where the calls for devolution are really real, because the only way you hold the thing together is by actually driving power downwards. So I think we will see more of that. You saw the report today about where we go in Scotland. I think you'll see much greater calls for devolution in London as a consequence. Politics becomes more local, becomes more regional, so that actually, if you like, the coalitions are smaller, the interests are smaller, and the people are better heard. But I wouldn't agree that politics is dead, because if politics is dead, human beings are dead. I mean, let's face it, we have to have some means of coming together to determine both mutual and individual interests, and we'll always need that. But the institutions of that are feeling tired, and the coalitions previously are being tested. And I would say that really since 2008, the dust has been up in the air. It has not yet settled. It's not settled in this country, it's not settled in many other developed countries, and it will not settle for some time. I think the other thing, I mean, Google, good and bad. I mean, in the end, usually where you've got massive technological change, we saw this previously with Fordist changes in the previous century, white goods and technology, we saw it with the railways and the canal. Those who invent the technology and own the technology basically make an incredible amount of money, monopolise and take over much of the world. And that's kind of what's happening at the moment with parts of technology. But usually the technology gets dispersed, more people start to own it and share it, and that changes a bit. And I think really what we're seeing since the birth of the computer, or 1971, and then into the internet, and now is actually that changing pattern. So that will change over time.
Thank you. And your views on Google?
Well, I sort of indicated, I don't want to come down on a particular side, but I'd be wary of monopolies, because usually that's bad news, history tells us. But let's wait and see.